Hey, someone asked me a question about concept artists. Let's talk about working with a concept artist. And so first, this person did this as a DM on Blue Sky, and that's an entirely fine way to ask a question. Well, I like to click the little thing on TikTok so everyone can see it and keep it in their head what I'm talking about because I ramble. It is fine to ask me that way because, like in this case, I think they probably didn't want to ask this publicly because, well, So first, this isn't in the question, but it is in the question. So I'm going to read the question here. I work on a small seed team in a large studio and discovered that on larger projects is a common practice to silo the concept team away and don't allow direct involvement. What? That's horrible. So first, concept artists in AI, because that's what I see a lot of small indie studios do. They try to do, and it just fails because this is horrible. Because if you try to prompt AI, you're going to keep prompting it. And it's like telling your kid brother what to do when they're playing a game and the idiot just won't make the double jump, right? Like, it's the same thing with using a concept artist that's AI, where you're never going to get the good thing. You're just going to get it where you eventually just tire out and go, yeah, fine, whatever, that's it. And that's what you're going to get stuck with. And you're not going to get the feedback, the back and forth. The back and forth, the feedback, that's the important part of this whole creation process. And that's why siloing away the concept people, my God, I have a good friendship with all of the concept people that I've worked with because it's such an integral part of the process and such a close tie-in, especially with a writer, of the characters you're creating, because it is back and forth, right? I will talk again and again about iteration and back and forth and like all of that, because that's the process of making this, right? It's the process of it coming out. And you start with the concept artists, and to not have that back and forth would be terrifying. So how we traditionally worked, and I really like this, because remember, in Left 4 Dead, you're just hanging out with these characters all the time. And they can't just keep saying who they are by like stopping and going, my name's Ellis, let me tell you about myself. I am, like, no. It's the words that they're saying, it's the clothes that they're wearing, it's how they're presenting themselves, it's their whole look, and their voice is one part of that, like their actual voice. But this is one part of building that character out. And so you have to work with the concept artist. So like in the Left 4 Dead series, how we did it was the concept artists would think of, like, so this is Left 4 Dead 2. So Left 4 Dead 1, we had done a little differently because there's something existing there. We were taking existing kind of work and building it out. For Left 4 Dead 2, we did this where the concept artist just came up with art, and then the writers came up with descriptions. And I think I've said this before, where like coach was something that was based on a high school coach that I had, except the high school coach I had was a little creepier because he actually married one of the students the day she graduated, kind of thing. Like, not exactly, but close enough. And Nick came from one of the concept artists. But when Nick originally came from the concept artists, he had Johnny Knoxville as the head. So at Valve, we often use celebrities' heads as a quick way to say something about the character and who we think they are. And I didn't think Johnny Knoxville's right. Johnny Knoxville performs for you. He gleefully wants to make you laugh. He wants you to appreciate his crazy. Where Nick does not give a damn if you laugh. He could care less. It's for him. And his very sarcastic wit comes from entertaining himself and anyone else who he thinks is in a rube and smart enough to understand. Right? And so those two very different characters, but it's a good starting point because it was like the rest of the clothes and everything fit, and we hadn't thought of like the kind of the riverboat gambler, which is like this cliche, but what could we take from that and could we build on that? Because, right, he's not a riverboat gambler. He's way more crafty than that. But you do that back and forth, and that process starts from the board, then the back and forth of the artists then taking what the writers made and creating the art, and the writers taking what the artists made and creating this backstory, and back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth. And then even as the models come into the world, some of the people who are the concept artists were also working on the project in other ways, and they would kind of clean up what came from the modelers because it didn't look right. Like it didn't have the vibe we had talked about. And that's just like, it's a long process, right? Nothing's done day one. And to not have that reliance and that back and forth on it, right? I would say at Valve, which was a really great way, like to work on this is it was so far that the concept artist would actually post a room full of all the concept art, and people could go up and put pins on the stuff they like, and then we would talk about what we liked, but like what got voted the highest and what didn't. I think the only thing was one of the guys who worked there, Nick, as a fireman, was a really good picture, but I didn't want a person of authority in the party because I thought that changes the dynamic because that person's used to leading civilians, and so we didn't do the fireman. Like there's stuff like that happens, but otherwise it's the back and forth with the concept artists and the writers and the animators and the modelers, and like everybody just gets involved on this and goes back and forth. And to silo that away, I think it's just you're losing that chance to have that iteration where you can have that back and forth and make it just way better. And in Anacrusis, I got lucky that I got a concept artist we could not afford, who should not have been working for us, to do all the work, and he would build out like the models for the little things in the world, and there would be diagrams of how they worked, and like the characters the same way. I was like, it's just so good working with him. He's so much fun. He's back over at Amazon making Crazy Creatures, which is his love. But like that back and forth process was a little different just because that was just him and I talking all the time about it, right? And so you just talk all the time and you have this back and forth. And you try to have it where not either one of you is the authority or the no way. Like doing the fireman was a rarity to say no way. Normally it's a lot of back and forth and why you have those choices. Because I've never worked with anybody who's so smart or so great that everyone else should just shut up and listen to them. It's always been a conversation and having that back and forth. And man, to trade that off, that would hurt. Oh, just side note. If you think, well, okay, now you're paying these people or you've got money or whatever. When I went to originally form Stray Bombay and I went to go pitch partners to do this with me as well as people to fund, I paid $10,000 to a concept artist. I should share these sometime. It's not the concepts of what would become the game. I wanted to have the feel of working together and the feel of space in a way that was new and different, and I took it and I ran with that. And we had 1 week to do that. A little late, a little back and forth. There's problems with their travel, but that ended up being really rewarding as well. But very different and something that we don't need to take forward. And actually, some of the modders kind of take some of that more forward than we did. But so yeah, man, don't silo away your concept artists. Work with them. Make them a team member. Everybody you can put in the room to go back and forth and have these conversations again, which is why remote work worries me.